Hi there and welcome to the labs, and I'm going to show you how to make this cribbage board. Okay, so this is a two-player cribbage board consisting of a cribbage board base and a lid that is personalised. And so this lid simply lifts up like so, and underneath we have a cavity for a deck of cards, as well as an area where you could put your cribbage pegs. Okay, so to make the board, we've got lots of toolpaths going on here. We've got pocket toolpaths, we've got profile toolpaths using V-bits, we've got drill toolpaths for the peg holes, we've got moulding toolpaths to create that beautiful curved edge around the outside. And then we have the lid. So on the top here we've got some text that I've used a VCarve toolpath on. We're using the moulding toolpath again to create this really nice border around the edge of that lid. This is a two-sided part, so on the bottom side we've got two pocket toolpaths for cavities for the cards and the pegs like you saw on the board, and then we have a pocket toolpath going around the edge of our part to create that gap where we can then simply insert that into the center of our board. So let's take a look at the file in the software.
So let's start by opening an existing file. So in your project folder, you're going to have two files, cribbageboard and cribbagelid.crv. These can both be opened in VCarve Desktop, VCarve Pro and Aspire. Okay, so the project consists of two files because we're cutting into two different materials. One is the board and one will represent the actual lid for the board. So let's start by looking at the cribbage board. So press open there. Okay, so we've got some important information to read and accept here. Okay, so you can see that we have a series of vectors that have organised into various different layers that are appropriate for what we want of them. And so the idea here is that all of these holes basically represent the peg holes, and then this area here represents a cavity that we're going to put our deck of cards into in this part here, and our pegs can go into this section here. And so really we're just going to look at recessing this whole section into the board so that we can hide the cards and the pegs using the lid that we'll come to shortly. We'll look at that file in a second. That is going to sit in this same space. Okay, so let's have a look at all of the vectors, what they're doing in terms of their toolpaths. So just going to switch over to the toolpaths tab. And so our first toolpath that we've got here is the swept profile. Okay, so that's this vector here, and we're using the moulding toolpath with this profile here. So if we just tile our windows, and then we'll just go into that toolpath to take a look at what's going on. Okay, so we're using this cross section here to sweep around the outside of this outer vector that we've got there. Okay, so I've positioned that cross section right up to the top of the material, and I'm going to look at cutting this in two passes. Okay, so we're going to look at creating a clearance toolpath first using an end mill. Okay, so it's going to machine the flat regions there, and then once we've done that, we'll look at going over that to create more of the curvature with a finer tool, which we're going to look at using an 1/8 inch ball nose, where we're going to vary the step over and skip the flat regions that our end mill will have cut. Okay, so that's pretty much that. So we'll just go ahead and preview this part of it. So this is just using the clearance tool, so you can preview that. Okay, so that's that hogging out the majority of it there. And then the other part of it, I've actually moved down the list, and this is all to do with the tools that I'm using. So I'm using the same set of tools here. It's just the way I've organised it. Okay, so normally you would see this directly underneath the cleared profile toolpath there. Okay, so I'm just going to show you the ball nose part of this. Again, using an 1/8 inch ball nose, we go ahead and preview that. we should see what that looks like. So it's going to give us a nice rounded edge like you can see there. Okay, so I'll just put that back in Z. Okay, so next in the list we've got pocket circle. So let's just double click on that to see what this is doing. Okay, so this is a basic pocket. So this is where we're going to create the initial recess for the lid to sit inside. So just cutting down 1/4 inch using an end mill tool. We're going to do that in an offset strategy. And you'll notice here I've put in adjust allowance to fit. Okay, so when we're cutting this, I'm going to cut the cribbage board last. We'll actually look at cutting the lid part of our project first. Once the lid's cut and we move on to this cribbage board, we can test that the lid fits inside of here in various increments, where we can look at adjusting the allowance here. Okay, so this is a value that I've used before. It generally works, but if you're not using this value, you just want to bump it up from 0, a negative value, until the lid fits inside of the actual pocket itself. So make sure we cut the lid first and then we move on to the cribbage board last. It's much easier to adjust the size of this pocket than to change the lid. Okay, so remember to test your allowances. So close out there and we'll just preview that. So preview this toolpath. It's just a simple pocket pass like so. Okay, so we've got the initial recess. So now we're going to cut into that recess. So we're going to cut the cards and the peg sections for those cards and the pegs to sit inside. So here, pocket cards, using this vector here. I've just measured a standard deck of cards and just kind of made it a little bit bigger, so you may want to adjust this according to the cards that you are using. And we're going to put in a start depth of 1/4 inch because we've already cut 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to cut down 0.55. Okay, so let's just go ahead and preview that one. So preview this toolpath. And that's what that's going to look like. And then we've got the pocket for the pegs to sit in. Again, start depth of 1/4. This time we're cutting a little less. We don't need to cut as deep as the cards because the pegs are obviously not that thick. Okay, and then we'll just close out and preview that toolpath like so. And that's what we'll be left with. So the idea is we put our deck of cards in there, put our cribbage pegs in here, and then our lid is going to sit on top of this recess here just to close it all off. Right, then we'll just put that back in Z. Next in the list, I can see we've got 2 V bits that we're using there. So we'll take a look at the profile V grooves. Okay, so this is just some decoration. So we've got a circle that represents the inside there, and then we've got a circle that represents the outside of our peg holes. So let's have a look at what we've got here. So using a profile toolpath, cutting down 0.1, using a 90° 1/4 inch tool, where we're going to machine on those vectors. So if we go ahead and preview that one, you can see that there. Okay, so very nice. And then we move on to profile V grooves. This is a different one. We're just cutting at a different depth here. So if we double click on that, we can see that's the middle one. That's dividing up the cribbage pegs. Okay, so our outer ring goes up to 60 here, and then the inner ring is which will take you to 120, where you've got your extra one there. Okay, so it's just going to kind of divide that up for us. So this time we're just cutting down 0.05, just so very small here. Again, on using the 90° 1/4 inch V bit, we could go ahead and preview that one. And that's what it looks like. Also in there, it's divided up the sections at the bottom. So this area here is where your pegs will start, and then this section here is basically the winning peg. Right then, so let's close out. I have a toolpath here called fluting cards. So if we double click on that, okay, so you'll be able to see we've got two very small lines here. And the idea here is I'm going to use a fluting toolpath, just with quite a large ball nose. We're going to ramp in at the start and at the end, just by a small amount of 0.1. And that's just going to enable us to have some kind of room to basically allow you to lift up the cards from the card base. Okay, so let's have a look at what we've done there. So start depth of 1/4 inch, because remember we've cut away 1/4 already, and the flute depth is going to be 0.1. Ramping at the start and the end 10% in a smooth type. Okay, so it's literally just going to do that in a nice smooth fashion. So if you calculate that and then preview it, you'll see that there. Okay, so it's going to give us a nice area to lift the cards out. Right, then we'll put that back in Z, and then we can look at the peg holes. Okay, so these are all of the holes that we need for our pegs. So the peg holes, each hole is 1/8 of an inch in diameter. So you'll need to ensure that your pegs will fit into that diameter hole. Okay, and in traditional cribbage board style, I've gone for kind of blocks of 5. Okay, so we've got 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, and then we're repeating that on the inside to get you to 121. Okay, and obviously you can see here this is a 2-player cribbage board. Right, and so we're going to look at using a drilling toolpath here. Okay, so here we're cutting down 0.35, and I'm using a very small end mill here. I'm going to look at using peck drilling. Okay, so the idea is it's going to cut down at 0.35, but it's going to kind of retract above the height from the previous pass by a small amount that is set in here. So we'll just go with 0.05. So it's just going to come down, lift, go down, lift, go down. Okay, and so if we close out there, we could go ahead and preview this toolpath, and we'll see that that's done that there for us. Okay, perfect. Okay, we've already done the swept profile, which was at the start, this border here. And the final cutout is a profile pass. So if we double click on that, check the settings here. So we're going all the way through using an end mill, machining on the outside of the vector. Okay, where you could look at adding tabs unless you've got a good hold down, but that's up to you. And then just give that a name, and then we'll just close out and we'll just preview to see how that looks. And that's what we've got. Double click to remove the waste material, and there we have it. Okay, so that is your cribbage board. So now let's quickly have a look at the lid. Okay, so here is the lid, and this is actually a 2-sided setup. Okay, so we've got the top of the lid, put some decoration in there. So I'm just going to look at VCarving some initials in here. You can do whatever you like here. You can even add in some kind of 3D detail. I'm just going with some initials just to personalize this. And then on the bottom side, you can see we've got the cavities for the deck of cards and the peg bag, or the pegs themselves. Okay, so what I've done is I've took the exact same vectors for from the actual board itself and brought them into a new session where I've basically created this design. Okay, so if we go over to the toolpaths tab, so what we've got here is we've got a swept profile. So if we just tile our windows, so this is for the border of the lid. So if we go in here, you can see the setup. So here I'm just using one tool, just the ball nose, to do this. It's not too much. It doesn't really need an end mill to basically hog that away. I'm okay as it is. So here I'm just going to preview that. Okay, and I'm going to cut this out of a different material. So here, just to preview it, let's make that cherry. Okay, so that's what the border would look like. Then we have the text that we're going to VCarve. So in here, I've just got a simple VCarve toolpath using a 90-degree 1/4 inch V bit. And then we could preview that toolpath. And I've actually got it set to machine the toolpath color and make that black, okay, because I intend to paint this area black, so that gives me a good visualization there. And that's pretty much it for the top side. Another toolpath here to profile the dowels. This is all part of the dowel setup for when we flip our material over in two-sided machining. And I won't go into this. There's lots of videos that I've covered that cover two-sided machining and this whole setup of using dowels to align your material in X and Y when you flip the material over. And I'll link you to those videos in the description. So I shan't talk about these for now. Right then, so if we close out, that's pretty much the top side done. Okay, so turning the material over, we're now looking at the bottom side. So our first point of call would be to profile the dowels of the bottom side into our spoil board so that we can basically flip our material over and everything will be lined up in X and Y. Right then, so our first toolpath is to pocket the lid border. Okay, so this is basically going to be an area where this will actually enable us to have this circle, this one here, sit into the recess of our cribbage board. So with that, let's just take a look at the toolpath. So we've got a pocket pass, 1/4 inch deep, in an offset strategy, and then if we just go ahead and preview that toolpath, see what that looks like. Perfect. Okay, so the idea is that this will act like a lip, and it will kind of sit over the cribbage, over the hole on the actual cribbage board itself. Then we have pocket cards and peg space, so a similar toolpath to what we did on the cribbage board, just cutting a little bit less because we don't need to cut as deep because we've got the majority of the depth in the cribbage board itself. So here we could just go ahead and preview that toolpath. Okay, so that's that one there. And then we have a profile cutout, cutting all the way through the material. So our material thickness this time is 0.8 of an inch. We're just using end mill machining on the outside, and I've got tabs in place here, and that's just to hold the lid to my block of materials. We're working in a double-sided session, and then we can just close out there, preview that toolpath to see how that part looks, and there we have it. And so that is our part. So if I just preview all sides, just so we have everything in place there, we can take a look at the overall part. Okay, so bottom side, top side. So this is going to sit in the recess of our cribbage board. Okay, it's going to sit in this part here. So some things to think about that I must bear in mind when I cut this out is some things that I need to check. So I need to remember once I've cut the lid, when we move on to the cribbage board, once we've cut this pocket out, I need to check that the lid fits in place first, and then we'll make those extra adjustments if it doesn't. I also want to check that the cards fit into this slot here, as well as my peg bag in there. And then once we've done all of the peg holes, I also want to make sure that my peg fits in those holes as well. And that should be everything in terms of the checks to ensure that things fit together. So that's pretty much it. So at this stage I'd go ahead and save out my toolpaths. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll just head over to the machine to cut those out.
So there we have our finished cribbage board. And if you want to have a go at cutting your own version, then simply head over to your V&Co account where you can download the project files from there. And if you like this video, then give us a thumbs up. And if you've not yet subscribed to our channel, then please hit the subscribe button for instant updates on the latest videos that we'll be releasing. Thank you for watching and happy making!